In 1974, a man was dragged from his apartment in Moscow, thrown onto a plane, and exiled from his homeland forever. His crime, he told the truth. Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn spent 8 years in Soviet labor camps, survived cancer, and wrote in secret for decades, all because he refused to do one simple thing: repeat the lie. The regime did not need his love, it only needed his silence. And that silence, that quiet compliance, is what keeps every system of oppression alive. Not the secret police, not the propaganda, not the gulags, your participation. Your willingness to nod along, to repeat what you do not believe, to clap when you feel nothing. Silence is compliance. Solzhenitsyn discovered something in those frozen camps that most people never understand. The most powerful act of resistance is not revolution. It is simply refusing to lie. And today we are going to explore the philosophy that shook an empire, a philosophy that begins not with grand gestures, but with the smallest, most personal decision you will ever make. As Solzhenitsyn himself declared, the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. What follows may change how you see everything. The Gulag Forge. Before Solzhenitsyn became the conscience of a nation, he was a decorated Soviet artillery officer. He believed in the system. He fought for it. Then in February 1945, he made a private criticism of Stalin in a letter to a friend. That letter was intercepted. Within weeks, he was arrested, stripped of his rank, and sentenced to 8 years of hard labor in the Soviet Gulag. 8 years for a private thought. Think about that, not for sabotage, not for treason, for words in a personal letter. In the camps, Solzhenitsyn witnessed horrors that most people cannot imagine. Starvation, beatings, men worked to death in frozen wastelands, but something unexpected happened. The Gulag did not destroy him, it transformed him. He later wrote that prison was where he truly began to think, where the comfortable lies he had told himself about the Soviet system were stripped away, one by one. Bless you, prison, for having been in my life. A shocking statement, but Solzhenitsyn meant it, because suffering, real suffering, has a way of burning away every illusion, and what remains is something the regime fears more than any weapon: clarity. But clarity alone was not enough. What Solzhenitsyn did with that clarity is what changed history forever. The anatomy of lies. Here is what Solzhenitsyn understood better than anyone. Totalitarian systems do not survive because of tanks and guns. They survive because of lies, and not just the lies told by the state. The lies repeated by ordinary people every single day. You attend the mandatory rally and applaud. You sign the petition you do not believe in. You repeat the slogan at the meeting even though it contradicts everything you see with your own eyes. Repeat, comply, survive. Each of these small acts seems harmless. What difference does one clap make? What harm is one signature? But Solzhenitsyn saw that these tiny surrenders are the oxygen that keeps the system breathing. The lie does not need you to believe it. It only needs you to participate in it. The lie can hold out against much in this world, but not against one thing, and that is art. If Solzhenitsyn's philosophy of resistance is resonating with something deep inside you, hit like and subscribe to unlock more wisdom from the vault. Because what comes next reveals exactly how the lie maintains its grip, and here is the terrifying part. Once you start participating, the lie begins to feel normal. You stop noticing it, you stop caring, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you lose something you can never get back. The soul's erosion. What exactly do you lose when you live by lies? Solzhenitsyn had a precise answer. Your soul. Not in some abstract theological sense, in the most practical sense imaginable. Every time you say something you do not believe, a small piece of your inner integrity cracks. Every time you nod along with what you know is false, you train yourself to distrust your own perception. Over months and years, this creates a person who no longer knows what they actually think. A mind chained becomes a ghost of itself. Solzhenitsyn watched this happen to millions of Soviet citizens, good people, intelligent people, people who privately knew the truth but publicly performed the lie. They became hollow, they drank too much, they could not look their children in the eye. As Solzhenitsyn observed, we do not err because truth is difficult to see. It is visible at a glance. We err because the lie is more comfortable. The comfort of the lie is a trap. It feels safe in the moment, but it poisons you slowly, like a toxin with no immediate symptoms. By the time you realize what has happened, you have forgotten who you were before you started pretending. The price of false peace is a life you cannot recognize as your own. But Solzhenitsyn did not just diagnose the disease. He prescribed a cure, and it was simpler than anyone expected. Live not by lies. On February 12, 1974, the day before Soviet agents seized him and expelled him from Russia forever, Solzhenitsyn released his most powerful essay. It was called Live Not by Lies, and it was not a call to revolution. It was not a manifesto for protest. It was something far more radical. Refuse the lie. The essay laid out a devastatingly simple philosophy. You do not need to be brave. You do not need to storm the barricades. You do not need to risk your life. You simply need to stop participating in what you know is false. 1. Do not say what you do not believe. 2. Do not attend what you do not support. 3. Walk away when the propaganda begins. 4. Do not vote for what violates your conscience. That is it, no grand heroism required, just a quiet, personal refusal to let the lie pass through you. Solzhenitsyn understood that the system was a machine that ran on human compliance. Every person who refused to feed it weakened it. Let the lie come into the world, let it even triumph, but not through me. This was not cowardice. This was the most dangerous form of resistance imaginable, because if enough people simply stopped pretending, the entire structure would collapse under the weight of its own emptiness. And that is exactly what happened. The power of one. The Soviet Union seemed invincible. It had the largest army on Earth. It controlled half of Europe. It had nuclear weapons pointed at every major city in the Western world, and yet one man with a pen brought it to its knees. How is that possible? Because Solzhenitsyn did something the Kremlin could not defend against. He told the truth about what he had seen. His book, The Gulag Archipelago, documented the Soviet prison camp system with such detail, such moral clarity, that it became impossible for anyone who read it to pretend the system was just. The book was smuggled out of Russia on microfilm. It was translated into dozens of languages. It shattered the moral credibility of Soviet communism worldwide. One word of truth outweighs the whole world. The KGB searched for the manuscript for years. When they finally found one copy, the woman who had been hiding it was interrogated so brutally that she took her own life. But by then, it was too late. The truth was already out, and this reveals something profound about the nature of lies. Truth cannot be unkilled. They can suppress it, they can punish it, they can exile the person who speaks it, but they cannot make it untrue, and every person who encounters it becomes a carrier. But Solzhenitsyn's message was not just about fighting governments. The everyday lie. Now you might be thinking, I do not live under a totalitarian regime. What does this have to do with me? Everything. Everything. Because the principle of living not by lies is universal. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you agreed with something you did not believe because it was easier? How many times have you stayed silent when you knew something was wrong because speaking up would cost you socially? How many times have you performed enthusiasm you did not feel, just to fit in? A smile becomes a mask, becomes silence. You do not need secret police to enforce compliance. Social pressure does it perfectly well. The fear of being excluded, of being labeled, of losing your status in the group. These are the invisible chains of our age. Solzhenitsyn would have recognized them immediately. The lie adapts to every era and wears the face of the culture it inhabits. The specifics change, the mechanism does not. In the Soviet Union, you clapped for the party. Today, you might signal agreement with ideas you privately question, simply because disagreement feels too costly. Different era, same chains. The question Solzhenitsyn poses to each of us is not whether we are brave enough to be heroes. It is whether we are honest enough to stop being accomplices. And this leads to perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all. The line within. In the Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn wrote a passage so profound that it has haunted readers for 50 years. The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart. This is what separates Solzhenitsyn from every other political dissident in history. He was not pointing fingers at the enemy out there. He was pointing inward. He had been a loyal Soviet officer. He had believed the propaganda. He had been, in his own words, complicit. The Gulag did not just show him the evil of the system. It showed him the evil within himself. The capacity for cruelty lives in every human being. And this is why his philosophy of resistance begins not with confronting the state, but with confronting yourself. You cannot live not by lies in public while lying to yourself in private. The external resistance must begin with internal honesty. Look in the mirror and find the diamond of truth within. This is deeply uncomfortable, because it means you cannot blame the system entirely. You are part of it, your compliance feeds it, your silence sustains it, and only your personal refusal to participate in the lie, starting with the lies you tell yourself, can begin to change it. But how do you actually begin? Practical refusal. Solzhenitsyn was not naive. He knew that refusing the lie came with a price. In the Soviet Union, it could cost you your career, your freedom, your life. Today, it might cost you your reputation, your social standing, your comfort. But he also knew that the price of compliance was higher, because compliance costs you yourself. So what does living not by lies look like in practice? 1. Never affirm what you do not believe to be true. 2. Never participate in rituals you find dishonest. 3. Do not suppress your judgment to gain approval. 4. Accept the consequences of your honesty. Notice what is not on this list. You do not have to convince anyone else. You do not have to start a movement. You do not have to be right about everything. You simply have to be honest about what you see and refuse to pretend otherwise. The most radical act in a dishonest world is simply to tell the truth. Solzhenitsyn knew that most people would not do this. Most would choose comfort. Most would choose safety. And he did not judge them harshly. He understood the cost. But he also knew that every society that has ever changed for the better was changed by the small number of people who decided that their integrity was worth more than their comfort. Integrity over comfort. And what happened when enough people made this choice reveals the true power of this philosophy. The empire falls. In 1989, something impossible happened. The Soviet Union, the most powerful totalitarian state in history, began to collapse, not from a military invasion, not from an economic crisis alone, but from the accumulated weight of its own lies. Collapse. Solzhenitsyn had predicted this. He understood that a system built on falsehood contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction. Because maintaining the lie requires ever-increasing energy, every crack must be papered over, every dissenter must be silenced, every contradiction must be explained away. Lies require infinite energy. And eventually the system simply runs out of capacity to sustain the fiction. When the Berlin Wall fell, when millions of people in Eastern Europe flooded the streets, what were they doing? They were doing exactly what Solzhenitsyn had asked them to do decades earlier. They stopped participating. They stopped pretending. They stopped living by lies. Violence can only be concealed by a lie, and the lie can only be maintained by violence. The cycle breaks the moment enough individuals withdraw their participation, not through violence, not through revolution, through the simple, profound, world-shaking act of refusing to pretend. An empire fell because people stopped clapping. But Solzhenitsyn left us with one final lesson, one that applies not to empires, but to you, personally, right now. Your first truth. Solzhenitsyn did not write Live Not by Lies for political scientists or revolutionaries. He wrote it for you, for the ordinary person who goes to work, raises a family, and tries to get through the day. Because that is where the lie lives or dies, not in parliament, not on the news, in your daily choices, in the words you say or refuse to say, in the agreements you sign or refuse to sign, in the performances you give or refuse to give. Every act of truth, no matter how small, is an act of resistance. You do not need to change the world, you need to change yourself, and the change is devastatingly simple. The next time you are asked to affirm something you do not believe, do not affirm it. The next time you are pressured to participate in what you know is dishonest, do not participate. The next time the lie asks for your voice, give it your silence. The system needs your compliance to survive. Withdraw it not with anger, not with a speech. Quietly, firmly, and completely. Quiet, firm, complete. Solzhenitsyn proved that this works. One man, one pen, one refusal to lie, and an empire crumbled. Imagine what would happen if millions of people made the same choice today. Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn endured 8 years in the gulag, exile from his homeland, and decades of persecution. And through all of it, he held on to one truth that the regime could never take from him. One word of truth shall outweigh the whole world. The philosophy of living not by lies is not about grand heroism. It is about the quiet, daily decision to preserve your own integrity, to refuse to let the lie pass through you, to accept whatever cost comes with honesty, because you understand that the cost of dishonesty is infinitely higher. It is your soul. Your soul, your choice. Today, right now, you face the same choice Solzhenitsyn faced. Not in a gulag, not before a firing squad, but in the quiet moments of your daily life, in the meetings where you nod along, in the conversations where you stay silent, in the rituals where you perform belief you do not hold. You can choose differently. You can choose truth. If you made it this far, comment Live Not by Lies to prove you are among those who refuse to let the lie pass through them. The wisdom of the ages is yours. Use it well. If this unlocked something in you, subscribe for more. The vault has more. Like this video if you want to go deeper.